Let's talk about something that we're all familiar with, disappointment. Well, welcome to The Big Idea, a time every week where we get to spend a few minutes wrapping our minds around one big idea about life and Jesus. And so today what we're going to talk about is the idea of disappointment. See, all of us, we know what it's like to be disappointed. We experience disappointing things all the time in our lives. Some disappointments are small. It's like when you pull out your French fries from the fast food restaurant, but you find out that they've already gotten cold. Or it's like when you open up that birthday gift hoping it's going to be something epic, something amazing, and it's like a pair of off-brand white socks, and you're like, are you kidding me? It's so disappointing. Other disappointments, though, they're bigger. It's when you come down on the ankle wrong and you find out you have a season-ending injury. It's when your parents sit you down and they say, hey, this just isn't working out. We're not going to stay together. We're going to get a divorce. And it's just disappointing. Life doesn't always work out the way that we want it to work out. We're all familiar with disappointment. And if you weren't familiar with disappointment before this year, then in the midst of 2020, you absolutely are. If there was one word I would use to describe 2020, it would be disappointing. Because the reality is that the further we get into this year, the more disappointing things become. And I don't know what it is that you're mourning the loss of right now, but I know I sure am mourning the loss of some things that were important to me. Maybe you're not going back to school this fall, you're gonna be online and you're already mourning what you lost there and you're disappointed this is how it ends. Maybe you are going to school, but you're disappointed about how you're gonna have to be separated from friends and distance and wearing masks. Maybe you're disappointed about a loss in freedom. Maybe you're just disappointed that the thing that we used to call normal isn't really normal anymore. See, all throughout life, we experience disappointment. And what I'm interested in today in particular is what we turn to, how we respond when those disappointments come. See, I think there's a few ways that people generally respond to disappointment in life. See, some people, they try and distract themselves away from the disappointment by binge watching Netflix or by crashing through a bunch of YouTube videos or scrolling through social media. Other people, they try and medicate the disappointment, numb it down, make it so they don't feel it. And they use substances, or they turn to certain websites, or they sleep, or they turn to food, or even just online shopping. Other people, they try and complain the disappointment away, and they think that if they can tell their friends how awful their life is, or if they can post about how negative things are online, that somehow the disappointment will be taken down by complaining. And what I'm wondering is, even though these are kind of natural things that all of us at certain times turn to, my question is, are these the best things? Because what I know about disappointment is that what you turn to really matters. What you turn to when you're disappointed really matters because it shapes everything else. See, here's what I mean. When you're disappointed, what you turn to is going to shape what you do next. And what you do eventually becomes a habit, and a habit really begins to shape who you are. See, what you turn to when you're disappointed has a huge impact on the person that you become. And I can't help but wonder if distracting ourselves or medicating ourselves or complaining ourselves away from disappointment is leading us to become people that we don't necessarily want to become. And so the question that I want to get after is there something better to turn to? What should you turn to in times of disappointment that all of us deal with? And to answer this question, I want to look at a guy whose name is Jeremiah. You may have heard of him before. Jeremiah was a prophet, and that means that his job was to tell the people what God had to say. And Jeremiah, I think, is especially qualified to talk to us about what to do, what to turn to when we feel disappointed, because Jeremiah dealt with a lot of disappointment. He was always disappointed. In fact, he had a nickname that was the weeping prophet. Dude was disappointed so much that he just always had tears streaming down his face. And if there's anyone that can talk to us about how to deal with disappointment, I think it's our friend, the weeping prophet, Jeremiah. And see, Jeremiah, he wasn't the only one who was disappointed. In fact, he was talking to a people, he was living among a people who were really, really disappointed. Jeremiah's people were called the people of Judah, and they had been exiled from their land to Babylon. They had been conquered, they had been taken away to a foreign nation where they didn't speak the language, where they didn't understand the customs, where people weren't very kind to them. They were missing home. They were disappointed. This isn't how life was supposed to be. If anyone could tell us how to deal with disappointment, it's Jeremiah. He was disappointed. The people he was around were disappointed. And the good news is he actually wrote a letter talking about how to deal with disappointment. If you want to read this letter, you can find it in the Bible. It's in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 29. And in this letter, Jeremiah writes to the people and walks through different ways that they can deal with disappointment. And what I love, what's really exciting, is that Jeremiah understood how important what you turn to when you're disappointed really is. And so in this letter, Jeremiah puts a huge emphasis on where you should turn when you're disappointed. In fact, he gets after it from the very beginning of this letter. He starts the letter by saying this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. And then he goes on from there. At the very, very beginning of his letter, Jeremiah directs the disappointed people. He directs their attention towards God. It's like he's saying, hey, when you're disappointed, you should turn to God. This letter is about 23 verses long. And in those 23 verses, Jeremiah mentions turning to God 15 times. That's more than half of the verses talking about turning to God, because Jeremiah knew it was such a big deal. He knew it was so important that the people, when they're disappointed, they turn to God. And so what I would say today for us as we deal with disappointment too is that when you're disappointed, you should turn to God. And I know that may sound cliche. I know that may sound like, oh, that's such a church answer. And I get that that's true. But the reality is that turning to God is the best option when we're disappointed. Because see, here's the thing. What you turn to is going to shape who you are. And there is no one that I would rather shape my life that I think should shape your life than God. I think he has the best picture of who you should become. And so when you're disappointed, you should turn to God because he loves you, because he cares about you, because he has a plan and a purpose for you, because he's never surprised by anything. God is not disappointed. He knows what's happening, and he is a great place to turn to when we're disappointed. See, Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, our expert on disappointment, he knew that when you're disappointed, you should turn to God. And that's what I want to share with you today. When you're disappointed, turn to God. And that's the big idea.